Hey, how's it going? Dan from modular.dev here. Sorry, I'm a couple minutes late. I was having some technical difficulties. Today, we're going to go over kind of an interesting topic, I think, and that is storing your items in a database, specifically Cosmos DB, and how you might do that from Blazor. So we're going to pick up where we left off on the chat application, maybe about a month or so ago. But really, you can do this with any application, and these things that you're going to learn here, you can take to whatever you want to work on. So you don't feel like you have to have watched those other videos to get something out of this. The first thing I want to talk about is what is Cosmos DB, why you might want to use it, and how to use it. So let me just bring up, I have these links in the description, but let me just go over them first. So this first one here is just a link to a GitHub issue that talks about Cosmos DB Preview 4 and whether or not it's still on the roadmap. There's a couple different versions of Cosmos DB floating around. I'm going to be using Preview 4 in this video. Preview 3 is kind of the more up-to-date one, you could say, but the Preview 4 will be the go-forward solution. They're just kind of waiting on some Cosmos DB features, and then you'll be able to get whatever you want to get out of version 4. So that they're just kind of waiting for that. But we're going to go ahead and use the preview version of version 4 today. And so if you want to install the emulator to do this on your local system, you can go to this other link that I put in the description, and then go down to the install the emulator link here. And then just click on this link here where it's going to allow you to install the Cosmos DB emulator. So what does the emulator look like? I pulled it up here. If you pull it up, you'll see that really you start off with something kind of blank. And it's okay if I show you my primary key. In this case, this is not a production primary key. But what you will see is you'll see these three tabs. You'll see the quick start, which will give you the information that you'll need to put, connect to it from .Net. And you'll see the Explorer, which allows you to create new containers and create, create databases and create containers within those databases. So you can do that from this tab. And so let's back up just a second and talk about what Cosmos DB is. This is another link that I have out there in the description. It is a NoSQL database. So many of you are probably familiar with SQL database, maybe SQL Server or some other kind of flavor of that. And those are very relational, right? You have tables, you have linking with foreign keys and all these types of things. You don't really have that so much with Cosmos DB. Cosmos DB is, like I say, a NoSQL database, and how it stores its data is in JSON format, which we'll see in just a bit. So you can go ahead and read through some of this documentation if you're interested, but that's a little bit out of scope of what we're going to do today. And lastly, I do want to show you, if you did want to make a database in the Azure portal, how you could do that. So of course you'll need an Azure account and all that, but you would come up here to create a resource, and you would click that, and you would click Azure Cosmos DB. And after you filled out some of these things here, you would then be able to access Cosmos DB from your account. Now, if this is your first time creating a Cosmos DB database, I would probably recommend to apply the free tier discount, which is a nice thing that they kind of give you. 400 RUs, which RUs is request units per second. So if you just have some small websites, you're not going to be hitting that 400 RUs. And 5 gigabytes of storage for free for the lifetime of your account. That's something that they added sometime, I can't remember if it was earlier this year or whatnot, but I personally just got my production database moved over to the free tier, and everything's working just great. So definitely take advantage of that if you haven't yet. And then after you fill out these things, you would hit review and create. And I'll just show you just briefly what one of mine would look like. If you go to the Data Explorer, you're going to see a whole bunch of tables here, and these are things that I have in my database. And like I said, this was all free, so I got all of these different containers. You get 25 of them for free. They just share the 400 RUs. And let me just show you what one of them would look like. This is how data is stored in Cosmos DB. So it's quite different than you might expect if you're used to coming from a SQL Server or something like that. But you have these different properties. Think of JSON if you're familiar with JSON. And those properties map to different values. And the values can be numbers or strings or arrays or objects. So you see here I have an array of strings. I only have one string in there, but you could have more. Here I have an array of objects. So very similar to JSON. Oh, and I forgot Boolean. You can put true and false in there as well. So that's kind of what the database is going to look like. So I'll go ahead and show you how we can use it in our chat application, and kind of just getting started from the very beginning as if it was the first time you've ever used Cosmos DB. So I'm going to close this out. I'm going to come to the emulator. So inside the emulator, like I said, you have your URI and your primary key. But now we need to create a container, or sorry, a database. We don't have a database even yet. I'm just going to hit new container though, because it'll allow me to create a database as well. So I'm going to put chat container or chat database. I'll just call it chat app for the database. And here's where you're going to decide if you want to provision database throughput. And really that means that throughput is going to be shared across all containers. So if you don't want that, if you want each container to have its own throughput, you're going to want to uncheck that box. But if you do, then you're going to set the throughput either to auto scale or manual, with 400 being the smallest that it will let you go. So I'm just going to go ahead and do 400. Auto scale, if you want to do that, is going to have some, it's going to be nice in the fact that you're never going to really have to worry about whether or not you have enough request units, which would be great. But you could run up your costs pretty quick. So keep that in mind. And there's other tutorials that I'll probably do a more in-depth tutorial on Cosmos DB in the future. But this one is specifically dealing with Blazor and how to get it into that chat app. We'll put a container ID on this as the chat container. And partition key is something that we need to kind of decide at the very beginning, because it's kind of how the data is structured. So the partition key will be physical, I think physical, maybe logical, but I don't know. Physical containers on a disk that basically groups the data together. So in our case, we have this chat app. So I think it's probably a wise decision to put the room name as the partition key. If you have maybe a website that has multiple clients that use it, that maybe they log in and do something, well, maybe client ID would be your partition key there. That's actually what I use in my application, my main application that I have. So let's go ahead and put room name here, I guess. And usually I like to use camel casing for property names, but you can do whatever you want. Okay, that looks good. So now we have a container, or we have a database and a container. And if we look at items, we don't have anything yet. We could click new item, and then we're going to start being able to put something in there. If you leave this blank, it will auto-generate an ID for you. But maybe we could put room and give that a room of room 1. And maybe we could put some other data and just give that a number, just so you can see how it looks. When I save this, now it creates a record. and it creates an auto-generated ID. And if you notice here, I misspelled the partition key that I just set up. I put it as room name, and I just called it room here. So that's why this partition key is blank. I should have put room name as room 1, but you get the idea, right? Let's go ahead and delete this. We want to see how to actually do it from .NET and how to integrate that with Blazor. So I've upgraded since the last time we were working on the chat app. I upgraded it to .NET 5. I upgraded it to the release candidate 1 preview release. So if you have any questions on how to do that, feel free to watch my video from last week. But for this time, we're gonna start from there. I also went ahead and created a Cosmos DB repository, and I'll kind of walk you through what I did there and why. Lastly, if you're gonna use Cosmos DB, you have to install the NuGet package. So if we go to dependencies here and we go to manage NuGet packages, I'll show you which ones you have as options. So if you type in Cosmos DB, the ones that you're gonna see are, to be honest, they've done a pretty poor job of managing their NuGet packages. There is so many of them that it's kind of confusing which one to use. This one here is the version 3 release, which, like I say, that's one that most people probably are using. But if you're starting a brand new project, I would recommend going to version 4. And unfortunately, they didn't call it Cosmos DB, they just called it Cosmos. Let me see if I can find it. I think it's Azure.Cosmos. There it is. So not many downloads yet, only 47,000 compared to however many millions they had with the other one, 4.24 million, 12 million. So this one's actually kind of hard to find. It's called Azure.Cosmos. That will be, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as I know, this is the go forward solution for Cosmos DB. So we're going to use that. So make sure to install that. I've already done so, but make sure to install that on your application. And then inside I made a class called Cosmos Repository, and I'll kind of walk you through what we got to do. The first thing we got to do is set up a Cosmos client, and then we got to get a database, and then we got to get a container. And those should look pretty familiar if you were paying attention when we were in the Cosmos DB emulator, because we have this database, and then we have a container inside that database. And so that's what we're looking for there. We're looking for the database name, which is, in our case, chat app, and the container is chat. So we'll put chat app here and chat for the container. Now, what goes here? Cosmos client. The Cosmos client is going to take 2 parameters. The first one being the URL of the or the URI of the Cosmos DB instance. So in this case, it's just this localhost. Now, obviously, if you're running on Azure, that would be something different. But let's go ahead and take this, put it in there. And the second parameter is going to be the primary key. So I'll just copy that and put that in there. So that should be all you have to do. Now, I'm setting up a Cosmos client and a Cosmos database and a Cosmos container. Really, I guess I probably don't even have to store these outside. You know what? I won't do it. I will put this in here. We don't need constant access to these things. All we really need is access to that container. But you can structure it however you want when you set yours up. So the container, this Cosmos container itself, is going to be the object that we can use to query our database and to add items to our database. So let's see how we can do that. This one here is a get all method. And so what we do is we pass in, I'm passing in a generic T type, but you could pass it, you don't have to do that. You could assume that it's going to be some kind of type. But what you need to do is pass in a type when you get to this container.getItemQueryIterator. So, maybe you would put, string, or maybe, well, it wouldn't be a string. Maybe you would put some object of some kind. But in our case, I'm going to pass through the object type all the way through, so you can see how it actually gets serialized to and from whatever class I want. And when we talk about schema compared to SQL, like SQL Server or a relational database, there is no schema here. We can pass whatever type we want and store that into the container. So, I mean, as far as schema goes, we don't have to worry about that. We don't have to worry about column names or anything. We just basically serialize it to JSON and store it in the container, which is really handy. So I put a little query together here, and actually I should change that to room name. I originally called it room, apparently. And this is the query. We're just going to grab everything where room name equals room, and that room is the string that we passed in here. And if I'm going a little fast, feel free to slow me down or ask a question. I know it's a lot, but there's a lot to cover, so that's why I'm going a little quick. So this is the query, and we're gonna execute that query, and that query gets put into a response. So then we can use this kind of newer C#8 thing called await for each, and that's actually kind of cool because that way we're not, I believe anyways, we're not getting the entire response at once. It's more like a stream, which will come back quicker, which is nice. So we're going to go through each one of these. You could do something to them, but we're just going to add them to a list, and then we'll return back that list. And that's the get function. Now, whenever we want to use it, all we got to do is say repository.get all and pass in the room name. So let's go ahead and actually do that first, and then we'll talk about inserting. The first thing we want to do, since this is a repository, we want to add it to our startup.cs. So previously we had services.add singleton previous chat archive, which was basically an in-memory database, but now we want to add Cosmos repository here, which basically is going to say, okay, we want one instance of this repository, and we're going to use that throughout our server side part of the application. So now, if you're familiar with dependency injection, all we really got to do is inject that into the container or the controller that we want to use. So let's go ahead and put Cosmos repository here. Oops. And I'll just give it a name. And I'm going to go ahead and just create a backing field for that and set it to it. So now we have this Cosmos repository, and that will get injected with our instance of the Cosmos repository, which is great. Now all we have to do is say, well, let's back up a second. We have this previous chat archive.chats. This is our in-memory database. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if it doesn't exist in the in-memory database, we're going to query from the repository. So if this is true, we're already returned. So otherwise, we're going to call Cosmos repository.get all, and we're going to have to pass in some type there, but I don't know what yet. And we're going to pass in room name. And that's going to return back a list of something. Var list. And so what do we want to put? What do we want our actual type to be for this? And I'm trying to envision how you'd want to do it. I think what you'd want to do is kind of batch them together. So maybe you would make a container. Let's go ahead and go back to Cosmos DB. Maybe you would come here and you would create some kind of messages property, which would be an array of messages, right? So let's go ahead and you know, maybe it would look like that, and then the message would be here. And then you could create a whole bunch of those. I think that's how I want to base the object off of in C#. You could do it in multiple different ways, but I think that's what I want to do. I will say, though, that if we're expecting tons and tons of messages, you probably want to kind of have a cutoff at some point. So maybe 100 messages or 1,000 messages or something like that here. And then you would create a new object that you could use. So let's go ahead and that way you're not going over the size limit that Cosmos DB puts on you. Okay, let's go ahead and create an object. We have this previous chat archive thing already. This is the in-memory one that we were using. So let's go ahead and create another one. So call it chat thread. And this chat thread is going to have a couple things. It's going to have an ID. That's going to be our database ID. And it's going to have a room name. And it's going to have a list of chat data. Messages, we'll call it. Okay, and by default, we'll set it empty to an empty list, the messages anyways. And so also what we need to do is we need to have these fields kind of match what they are in Cosmos DB. So the ID field, the auto-generated ID field, is lowercase, and our partition key was room name with a lowercase r. So there's a few ways you can do it. The simplest way, probably not the best way, but the simplest way would be JSON property name and give it a lowercase there. Probably a better way would be to create a custom JSON serializer that would automatically camel case everything, but that's a little bit out of scope of what we want to do here. So let's go ahead and put this room name there. And just for good measure, let's put lowercase messages here, just so it's camel case. Now we could have called our actual properties with lowercase letters, but that's kind of bad practice when we're talking about public properties. But anyways, so now we have this chat thread object, and let's go ahead and let's just try to insert something in there first. So yeah, let's go ahead and go to the chat hub. This is where we're going to be sending a message. So what we want to do is we also want to inject the Cosmos repository here, kind of like what we did in the controller. And we're going to assign it a backend field. So whenever we send a message now, we're going to put something in the database. So we got our Cosmos repository dot upsert, which is another method that I wrote that I don't think I explained. It's very simple though. You basically just pass in an item and you insert it into the database using container.upsert item async. So an upsert basically checks to see if that item exists. If it does, then it updates it. Otherwise, it inserts it. And we're just returning back whether or not it succeeded based off of the status. That's all that method does. So let's go ahead and go back here. And we want to pass in a chat thread. That's what we want to do. Let's go ahead and create a chat thread. Up here, chat thread equals new chat thread. That's fine. All right. And then we'll pass in chat thread here, and we'll await that because that is an asynchronous method. So when we do this, we create a chat thread, and what we need to do is check to see if it exists in our in-memory database. And it's tough because do we really need an in-memory database anymore? I would say yes, just because otherwise we're going to be making a database call every time somebody sends a message, or, well, anytime anybody tries to receive messages in the chat controller, then we would do it. I don't think it really matters. However, let's go ahead and just keep using our in-memory database, but just make a copy of it in the Cosmos DB database. So in that case, we need to change something with this previous chat archive. This used to be a list of chat data. Now it should be a chat thread. Okay. So now we have our chats, our chat thread, and we're going to be pulling it by a room name. We want to see if it already exists in the in-memory database. If it does, we just want to add the new chat message to the messages list. And if it doesn't, we want to add a new chat thread. Well, we already have a chat thread up there. Hold on. Chat thread. Yeah, I think that's right. So we would do chat thread dot messages dot add chat data here. Okay. We need to make a copy of this if it exists. We'll overwrite it in a second. So for our previous chat thread equals that. Previous chat. Actually, no, we don't want to do that. We want to keep it as chat thread. We don't want to create a new variable. Whoops. So chat thread equals previous chat archive.chats, and here we're gonna add the new message to the chat thread. There, that's what we want to do. And actually, we could put this at the bottom. That would work just fine. Okay. So if it already exists, we're going to use that chat thread instead of the new one that we made. And if it doesn't exist, we're going to add the new one that we made to the list. And either way, we're going to add the new message that came in via the chat application. And then we're going to update it in the database. Okay. Shall we try it and find out if that works? Let's go ahead and make sure we can build. I'm sure there's got to be some kind of error. Let's see what it is. Okay, I was in the middle of doing something and I didn't quite complete it. So let's go ahead and just comment this out for now, I guess. And I'll just return a new list of chat data for now. Okay, what other errors do we have? Or is that it? Oh, messages, because we changed that. Let's see what else we have problems. Okay, I think that's fine. Let's go ahead and see if it works. I'm going to set a breakpoint here. Oh, I already have one. Okay, cool. I also want to set a breakpoint in the Cosmos repository just to make sure that the client and the database and the containers are all getting initialized successfully. and we should see this getting initialized. Okay. So our client exists, our database exists, and our container exists. So that's good. Let's go ahead and run it. All right, we'll be Bob, and we're in room 1. Okay, let's go to room 1, and we're going to attempt to get the messages, and we don't get anything, so we just have an empty list. Let's go ahead and send test message. All right, we're going to hit this breakpoint in the chat hub. So we have the we just created a chat data object. We're gonna, it doesn't exist, so we're gonna add it, and then we're going to add the new message to the chat thread. And now we're gonna upsert this into the Cosmos DB database. Let's see if we can get it on the first try. No, looks like we have some kind of problem. Whoops. Okay, we have one of the specified inputs is invalid. Okay, well, let's see if we can figure out what's going on. Let's try it again. Oh, duh. Okay. So we also need to put the room on here. We didn't do that. Room name equals room name, and we should also give it an ID. I think it would auto-generate it, but I like to kind of control it from the C# if I can. So I'm going to put new GUID, which that's just a unique identifier. .toString. Oops. GUID.newGUID.toString. All right, so now we have a room name and an ID. Let's just make sure that that works. Hopefully that was the problem. Oh, I'm going to remove that breakpoint. Okay. We're attempting to get nothing. Let's go ahead and send a test message. Okay. I didn't see an error. I guess I thought I had a breakpoint in there, but I must have taken it out. Let's see if it got put into the database. So I'm opening up the emulator again. I'm going to hit refresh. Well, let's discard this one. Refresh, maybe. There it is. Sometimes it takes a couple clicks for some reason. But there we go. We have ID, room name, messages. So it was, I mean, relatively easy to do that. I know there's a couple issues, but it's great that we don't have to define the schema. Let's go ahead and try putting another message in there, making sure that we can have multiple things. Okay. Get rid of this breakpoint as well. Okay, I got lost there. All right, here we are. There we go. So we have, now that upsert worked, we have this one getting updated with the new message. So let's just fetch from the database, and that should be about it. Let's go ahead and go into the controller. So we commented this out for now, but let's let's stop the application first of all and uncomment this. So we want to get all what? We want to get all chat threads from the database. That's not what we're returning though. We're returning a chat data object, and really all we really want is one chat thread, right? We just want the one for this room name. Now, if we had a lot of messages and we decided to put them in batches. We may have multiple threads, but for now we're just going to assume we only have one, just to make it easy. And so we're gonna do first or default, and that's going to give us the first chat thread that got back from the database. And let's just store that into something here. What's the problem? Oh, async task. It's complaining that we're not in a async method. Okay, so let's make this a not list. Let's just make this chat thread. And chat thread may be null. If we come to a place that doesn't have anything in the database yet, we want to just return an empty list. So let's return chat thread question mark dot messages. And question mark dot basically says make sure it's not null. It's not going to throw an exception. This question mark basically, it will not throw an exception on this. It will go over to the next thing. And we're going to put question mark, which means if it's null, so if this whole thing returned null, which means that either this or this was null, then we're going to return a new list of chat data. All right, let's try it. All right, let's go room 2 because we don't have anything there yet. Okay, this should be. Oh, do we have a problem? I don't know. I don't know if we had a problem or not. I don't see an exception, but you know what? Let's go to room 1 because that should actually have something in it. All right, what's going on here? Let's try it again. All right, in this case, we have 2 messages. So that worked. We were able to pull those from the database. Cool. Let's go ahead and just double check. I don't know what happened the first time. I didn't see an error. Maybe I hit F5 instead of F10. I don't know. Let's try just setting a breakpoint there and going to a room that doesn't exist yet. There we go. Okay, I must have hit something. So this is null, which means this whole thing is going to be null, and we're going to return back an empty list, which is what we want. So let's go ahead and just double check. We can send a test message, and that should go into the database as a separate thread. And there we go. We got another one. So I think that's about it. So now if we stop running and we start running, we still have everything. So it's better than an in-memory database, that's for sure. I do also want to point out that if there are people that are fans of the entity framework in .NET, they are releasing a Cosmos DB version of the entity framework, I think with .NET 5. I know in the preview releases I was able to use it. I was able to do it with Identity Server as a repository there, so that was kind of cool. But yeah, either Entity Framework or just using the Cosmos DB NuGet package, either one you can use to store items into your database. So I know it was a lot that we went over, but I hope you learned something. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. All right, thank you.